while she was remote viewing, all of a sudden down this corridor, this being, shadow person, whatever you want to call it, came racing towards her. It was giant size, and rushed her and literally booted her completely out of the complex while in astral travel remote viewing.
We came up to a roundabout. On the left-hand side, we overtook a car that was going, because it was going really slowly. This car in front of us was going really slowly, and we wanted to get to our film, so we overtook it. And we looked to the left as we were overtaking it, and there was nobody in the car at all.
I felt this presence literally walk up on me along the side of the bed and was standing right next to me.
The people on the other side were talking about a level of reality between the earth and the spirit world that they were contacting, which no one was aware of. And it's like another level where there is another civilization there that exists, they were saying. And they said it's not bad, it's not necessarily good, it just runs alongside your own civilization, and it's between your world and our world.
You're listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and now it's time for the Paranormal Peep Show.
Hi, welcome to the Paranormal Peep Show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and I'm joined by Andrew Chaplin, and special guest tonight is Mark Johnson, calling in from the US of A. And Mark Johnson runs the Paranormal UK Radio Network along with Irene Allen-Block. So welcome, Andy, and welcome, Mark.
Hello.
And hello.
How are you? How are you both? One at a time, so I can one on first.
I defer to Andy.
Okay. Yeah. How you doing, Neil? So we're for our viewers, we've had huge technical issues in actually trying to connect to make this happen, because since they've deleted Skype, we've been running around with Teams and Zoom and goodness knows what else, and there's so many technical things like audio and video and connection problems. Isn't it weird? Apparently we went to the moon in the 1960s and 70s, and in all of that time we can't actually get a proper kind of internet meeting together like in 2025, never mind now 1975.
I'm going to revert to a tin can with a piece of string. I think that was fairly reliable,
which is pretty much like the moon landings anyway.
Yeah, I'll just put it and we'll have Musk launch a rocket and to get the string over here.
This dude owned rocket.
Yeah, you think with all these satellites in the sky, all these streams of satellites connecting, we'd at least be able to get something. I mean, we obviously have finally connected, but it took a long time. And I'd just like to voice my public opinion. I think everyone's in agreement that Skype was working fairly well.
Yes.
And they've decided to cancel it. And Microsoft Teams, well, sod that for a game of soldiers.
I mean, if it works, why try and fix it? If it ain't broken, don't fix it.
Because it's their brand. That's why they bought Skype to get rid of it.
Yeah, it's their IMAP.
To push their own product, Microsoft Teams, which I don't know what I can say here, but
well, let's just say it's performing as well as their Windows and as well as their vaccines.
There you go.
Oh, blimey. So, Mark, how are you, first of all?
Well, it's been an interesting last several months, that's for sure. I've been dealing with some health issues and whatnot, but helping Irene get her not one, but 2 books published within the last couple of months, which we'll talk about here in a moment. And she and I are currently working on one together, which is going to be a very all-encompassing book on the paranormal, going into detail on different experiences we've had, both together and separately. and just trying to go into some familiar experiences that people have, but go into more detailed explanations, some that a lot of people may not have thought of. Everything from dealing with demons, especially, that's her specialty. Mine is dealing with the more wonky aspects of time and multiple dimensions and things like that.
So you've got Irene's book there, which Irene has kind of selected you as a spokesperson for it. So
Yes.
you've obviously worked on it, so you know the book fairly well.
Yes. So the one of the two books we have, well, unfortunately, I don't have the book in front of me. I lent it to a friend and I haven't gotten it back yet. Walking with the Dead, which is her autobiography of growing up as a psychic medium and dealing with all the really crazy things that she has experienced in her life that so many people don't know about. She talks about a few on our own radio show, the Paranormal UK Radio Show. And, but this goes into so much more detail. In fact, after reading the book, I was surprised because she and I have been friends for over a decade now. And there's things that I didn't even know that I found to be fascinating, totally fascinating. And then she also wrote this fictional book called Mysterious Tales of the Unseen, which is a collection of paranormal themed short stories, kind of in the vein of the old, like 1940s, little serial, like that would appear in newspaper magazines, that it has that vibe to it. And there's some really creepy stuff in here. A lot of it based on personal experiences, but it is a fictionalized version. Short stories, but they are really well done, and that is now available.
Did you say, Mark, that Irene's speciality is dealing with demons?
Yes. Well, it wasn't a she's kind of retired right now, but we still look into some cases occasionally.
How would she differentiate between a demon and, say, a pissed off or angry negative human spirit?
She doesn't usually like me talking like this, but, because she doesn't like labels and terms, but just so people understand that she is, without a doubt, probably the most incredibly talented psychic medium I've ever met. And she has done most of her work. I mean, she did a lot of work in person there in the UK, but her organization, Spirit Rescue International, helped people literally all over the world, because one of Irene's other specialties is being a remote viewer. And so using remote viewing, she's helped people with cases as far away as New Zealand, cases here in the States, because she can tune in to a location and see what's there.
Right.
And as far as telling a demon from a irate human spirit, which they can be pretty nasty sometimes, if they're a-holes in life, they're a-holes in death. So
Yeah.
But it's their energy. It's the energy that these entities or these spirits give off, and what we would refer to as demonic gives off a much more intense negative energy.
I found that when I went back to kind of like progression into spiritualism and kind of like mediumistic things myself, I was getting problems with negative entities when I was practicing remote viewing myself. Do you think that remote viewing somehow opens the door not only to the good things and kind of like the interesting things in life, but also opens the possibility of a door of other things coming in that are not quite so nice?
Well, in dealing with anything involving remote viewing or astral traveling, there is a part of the person, their consciousness or their spirit, so to speak, is like astral traveling, in that you're projecting yourself into another location to view it or remote work through it. And it's like the moth to a flame. These entities can sense your presence, your energy, your light, and you have to make sure you are properly protected.
And what sort of procedures would Irene typically do for protection?
She has help from, I don't think we ever clarified what to call them, but there are angelic type beings or spirits that she has worked with, other types of entities that have come through and worked to protect her and help her during these cases, especially when doing a clearing of a location. Because, with getting rid of a demonic force, human spirits, you just need to coax them to move on to the other side. But demonics need to be pretty much forced out.
Crowbar out.
And energy cannot be destroyed. And so it's basically pushing the energy out somewhere else. The demons aren't destroyed. They can go somewhere else or do whatever, but it's pushing them out of the location and then, not letting them back in.
Where do you think they get shoved to? Would it be, for instance, another realm and another reality, or would it simply be another location on Earth and bugging someone else's house?
That's a good question, to be honest. I don't know if anybody really has that answer. And I believe that these demonic, and again, I use the term loosely because I'm not using it from a religious perspective, just so people understand. They have a better idea of the type of negative energies we're talking about. I believe that they can wander around the earth. They could try to find someone else. Usually in these cases, sometimes people in a location have invited it in somehow. Either they're playing around with the occult, or even if somebody is really troubled, they're going through some hard times, mental illness maybe, or whatnot, they have that low vibrational energy, which attracts these things. Because there's a lot of them, I call them paranormal parasites. They feed on negative energy, like a mosquito. And if you're putting off the energy that they can feed on and grow stronger, they will attach to you or a location. And, but I think they also flitter in and out of our dimension or our realm, because, our physical reality is just one of many, many, many different realities and planes. So, and I believe they're perfectly capable of going in, going out, wherever their vibrational frequency will allow them to go. Obviously, they're going to have trouble going to any place with a higher vibrational frequency. Because theirs is so low.
Yeah, I mean, there's this theory of sorry, I was just going to say there's this theory of loosh, isn't there? These negative beings feeding off loosh. Have you heard that? It's spelled L-U-C-H-E.
No, I haven't heard of loosh before.
Okay, yeah. So it's you could look it up, and people listening to this can look it up as well. I think it's spelled L-U-C-H-E. And the idea is exactly what you said, Mark, that these negative beings, they feed off fear, they feed off hatred, they feed off, I mean, something like a concentration camp historically would be like an absolute feeding frenzy for negative beings. But yeah, it's the loosh apparently is what they're feeding off. Neil, you were going to say something?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking back to, where do these entities go when they've been cast out? And I just remember back to, I mean, I'm not religious in the slightest, but I kind of always have debates with religionists or apologetics on the Christian side of things. But it's interesting, I think, in the Bible where Jesus casts out a demon or demons from, it might be a man or a girl, I can't remember who it was now. I think in the later editions of the Bible, they actually said, this person suffered from epilepsy. So it's a bit of a strange thing to have mentioned in the Bible that someone had epilepsy, but then was saying...
Someone's trying to do revisionist history there, because that is not what the Bible... They didn't know.
No, that's right. It suddenly became very medical.
Yeah.
But apparently Jesus cast these demons out, and they went into pigs, a lot of swine, and then ran and jumped off a cliff or something. And
this is why they don't eat pork.
Well, yeah, I mean, pigs are considered in that kind of region around that time, and probably still to this time, as dirty animals. And so they consider, I'll put
pigs root in the mud and the filth, and their purity laws back then, especially the it was considered unclean. That's why they couldn't eat pork. Not
Hmm.
so much because of demons, it's just because they rooted around in the mud, so they figured they were
So
unclean.
you can get bareback bacon, you can get smoky bacon, you can get demon flavored bacon. But that'd be interesting to put under the grill.
What if I
They
have
have a little-
element?
Does that have like a little ghost pepper kick to it?
So once, I mean, when Irene's doing her remote viewing, and she can do it like as far places as, for instance, New Zealand, you mentioned, how would she do? Look at a map and focus on a target area or coordinates given to her or something?
Of course, a lot of this goes back a lot of years. So, but she had ways of tuning into a location. Maybe if they sent her a picture of the front of the house or something, and she could go there and look at it from above. I even worked on a couple of cases more recently with her where she's able to see it above and then get whatever feelings she's getting there, then project herself into the house and see what's there, pick up whatever energy's there. And sometimes it's trying to disguise itself. Sometimes it's hiding. There's so many cases of demonic activity where, like, a perfect example would be the Sally House hauntings in Kansas that were really made famous on TV back in the 90s with the show Sightings. And the family there started seeing this little girl spirit. And this is a very common type of beginning to this type of haunting. They see a little girl or child spirit. And then, of course, the homeowners or the family starts feeling empathy towards the spirit and not knowing it's a trick, not knowing that these entities can project themselves as anything they want. But once you start giving it energy, start sympathizing with it, talking to it, whatever, you're basically inviting it in to attach to you, your energy, which it starts feeding on. And this is why if you read most demonic cases, they start off small and then they slowly start getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because it's the more they feed, the more powerful they get here in our physical realm.
There's an analogy with that. Apparently, if you get two tuning forks and you ding one, the other one will start resonating to that tuning fork. So in a similar way, if you kind of imagine a person as a tuning fork, if they give off a resonance and they give that resonance to this other being and they start resonating at the same vibration, they're going to create a connection. Now that works both positive and negative. So it can work in a positive way in terms of working with angelic realms and with God or higher consciousness or guides, but unfortunately it also can work on lower levels as well.
The one thing I found fascinating going through all of Irene's accounts and with dealing with demonic type hauntings is how different every single one is. You know, there are people who come in, and actually what would usually happen in a lot of these cases, the people would call in a local medium and psychic who didn't know what the heck they were doing, and they'd stir things up and make things even worse. And then finally be the one called, and she'd have to go in and clean up their mess. And usually by that time, it's much more dangerous because these people did not know what they were doing and stirred it up. So, but she would always meditate and tune in to, whoever or whatever works with her, and comes up with what she needs to do for each case. And again, it's in the book. It's fascinating because they're so wildly different. In one case, she had to work with colors. She was told, work with the color green for this specific case. Another case was she was told to come in from a very Christian-oriented perspective. Even though she's not religious, but that's what she had to do in order to get this spirit, this negative entity out of the house. So every case is unique and different, and you need a different approach. So these people who come in doing their own little shtick every time, waving sage around. One of her favorite sayings is, you know what happens when you burn sage in your house? You stink it up. That's all it does.
Hmm.
But in some cases, though, and this is another thing people don't understand, a lot of people don't understand, burning sage doesn't do a darn thing. However, your intention is what gives the energy to it. If you believe in that sage, that it's going to absolutely do the job, then that's what gives it power.
Permission slip, as Bashar would say.
It's still, inanimate object.
Yeah.
There's no spiritual qualities to it all. People have crystals. People have put salt around the house. If I was, salting a bland meal, maybe, but, doesn't do anything. But again, it's all about intent. What you put into it is what will make it work. And again, it depends on the level of intent that you're able to put into it. And in a lot of cases, it needs a lot more power than most people can give.
Yeah, I think that's the same thing could be said for kind of like holy water and the Bible. It's not so much the objects themselves; it's the belief and the intent. Yeah,
yes.
I agree with that. Now, this is a really interesting one, Mark. There is a theory, and I came across this a while back. There's a theory that before humans were on this earth, there was another species that was a demonic race or a race of beings that weren't particularly negative, but they were just kind of their own beings. And then humans came along, invaded Earth, so to speak, or took over, booted them out. And that's why they've got such negative feelings and cause chaos amongst humans, because they want to kind of get revenge or get their planet back. Have you heard across this?
I've heard similar stories. And in fact, if you want to look at it from, let's say, some apocryphal writings, Book of Enoch or whatnot, which talks about the Watchers, but there's also the stories of the war in heaven and Satan basically being jealous of humanity. God creates humans. Satan was top dog there for a long time. And when God created humans, they got jealous and they refused to bow down to humans, which caused the war in heaven. And Lucifer, Satan, got kicked out, and he took all of everyone who sided with him with him. Now, I sometimes have problems with that because, angels in heaven's supposed to be good, high vibration. Why are they suddenly turned into demons possessing people and doing all sorts of evil? I don't know. I think it's just allegories. I think it's just ways of trying to explain some of the activity we have. But to your point, Andrew, what you said makes a lot of sense in terms of what I look at as elemental spirits, the ones that have never been incarnated as human, that can be really nasty. But I also don't think that they're necessarily evil per se, but they can, more like human beings. Some can be good, some can be bad. They're all still human beings. Even the old folklore, the fairy stories, the fae, some could be good, some could be really nasty to you. Even in Middle East, the jinn, the exact same way. They tried to separate them by colors, red jinns being nasty, blue jinns being, I don't know, I forget the color scheme. But it's every race or every type, has varying levels of how they're going to behave.
You're into the fairy thing, aren't you, Neil?
Yeah, I was just thinking actually, something I read recently where someone was talking about how they protect themselves against fairies and the confusion that they can throw out. And this person was supposedly, if I recall the story correctly, was with a load of scientists out in the field. I think this is from a conference I went to that it was mentioned. I went to this cryptid conference at the weekend, and someone there was talking about fairies and stuff. And this person was saying about how they were getting confused by the fae out in this location somewhere. So the person who was like leading this little expedition was leading with some scientific types. I don't know if they were necessarily scientists, but I kind of got the impression they were more academic types or something, And this person said, okay, to stop this confusion, what we're getting confused about, what you got to do is take your coat, turn it inside out, and then put it on inside out. And all these academics just said, yeah, okay, we'll do that. And they, even though it went against their logic, they took their coats off, turned them inside out to protect themselves against any confusion of the Fae. I don't know. I mean, someone else could probably write in and tell me what that means. I'm going to have to look into that because I have heard it before, but I can't remember the whole reason. But it kind of turns the world on its head, and you're fighting the confusion with confusion or something. Maybe it's something like that. I don't know how it turned out at the end for the academics and this person out in the field, but hopefully it was okay for.
Maybe they're still out there, wandering around confused.
Yeah, with real bad fashion. So with the thing about the demons is that a lot of these kind of exorcisms are being performed by members of the Catholic Church, and I wonder, all this stuff like you talked about the sage, that they're coming at it with the Bible and holy water and stuff like that. And then Irene had to come and do one particular kind of exorcism, for want of a better word, with a very Christian approach. So I wondered if the family that she was dealing with was very Christian orientated for them to kind of accept her.
Or the entity, and I believe this was the case in this particular case, the entity turned out to be not so much demonic as what we talked about earlier, a very irate, pissed off human spirit that could still simulate a demonic type activity because they're so negative, but maybe they were also very religious in life. Or they believe that, even if they're bad, they're still afraid of going to hell. That's why they don't cross over and they continue their bad behavior. And so she used the religion as a way to get to them, the religious practices, because that's what that entity believed in.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah,
it's a psychological approach, isn't it? By sound,
it's the same way of over here, or in the UK, which you have a predominantly Christian type nation, but yet you would not send a Buddhist monk over here to do an exorcism in a house that the family practices Christianity.
Yeah.
And because it's probably not going to work. You have to fine tune your approach based on what you're dealing with. And of course, Irene is able to figure that out not only through the vibration of the entity, but also tapping in, meditating, getting instructions from her guides or her tag team, as I sometimes call them, to tell her, give her information on how to handle those types of entities.
Where do you think the color comes in? Like, because I know somebody that works with colors, and the colors green and yellow and blue are very important. And she goes into it quite in depth, but each color has a different resonance. So when Irene's working with a color with a case, what do you think's going on there?
I know that in her case, she just used whatever color she was told to use. She didn't fully understand it. I have done some training as a shamanic practitioner a few years ago, and one of the healing classes that we took was all about healing with color and different colors having that different vibration. And depending, and again, it's the same thing. It's meditating, or in shamanism, it's journeying and picking up on the information on what is best going to work towards whatever the illness is, what color will work, the vibration. Because colors are, as we perceive them, are light energy vibrating at certain frequencies. And that frequency comes into our retinas, our eyes, and that's the color we see. Colors themselves really don't exist. It's our brain interpreting frequencies.
That's interesting. Yeah.
It's interesting, actually, because they recently announced that they discovered a new colour. I don't know if you've heard
I've heard this. Yeah. How can they?
Yeah, it's something like a special type of green, I think it was, but I'm not 100% certain. So I don't know, how they suddenly discover a new colour, because, I mean, you're sitting there looking at your prism with a piece of paper. Oh, what's that little one there?
I'm pretty sure, Neil, if they flashed it up, we just go green.
Yeah. Just a varying tone of green, like dark green, light green, or
I work in Photoshop a lot, and when you come in for selecting a text color or whatever, the big color bar things comes up. And you can select the major color you want to work with, whether it's blue or green or gold, yellowish. And then when the box pops up, there's everything from the white all the way down to black, and then all the variations of that color in between. And each one is really a different color. But they're lighter or darker shades. So there's unlimited colors that it could be, and putting names to it.
Yeah, we're all kind of proteges of Photoshop, and we know exactly what you're talking about. It's when you want to try and pick the same color again the next day. Thinking, now, what color was that? Because there's all these little hashtags of
hashtag DGFY.
Yeah. So, has Irene ever come off badly as a result of any of these encounters, or has she always got sort of a lot of protection and been okay?
Well, I've been in the middle of talking to her. It wasn't really on a case, but there have been times she's come under psychic attack. Something was attacking her, and all of a sudden, usually at that time we were just texting back and forth through Skype, Microsoft, and all of a sudden everything starts coming through jumbled, and I was just able to make out a couple of things that she was in the middle of a psychic attack. It's almost like in the middle of having a seizure. And it took a few minutes before she started coming back to normal, because something was attacking her at that time. In most of these cases, she hasn't been personally attacked, or she's had protection, but she sets up that protection before she even goes in. And she knows, she's done the work beforehand. She knows exactly what kind of protection she's going to need. But getting hit out of the blue or suddenly, I mean, even at her house, which is actually featured in the book because she's talked about the ghosts in her house, which there's 3 of them from the turn of the century, last century, that once lived there. But the land where it sits on some ley lines, there's some portals around, and she gets a lot of transient stuff coming through. And every now and then there's this one that comes through, she calls the stinker, because it literally gives off bad odors. And when I was over there visiting back in 2023, when you and I got to meet Neil, I experienced that myself one day, because I walked into this hallway and there was this kind of sharp, rancid. The only way I can describe it is it smelled like marijuana. And that sharp, pungent type smell. It smelled like it, and yet it didn't. It had its own odor to it. And I asked her, I go, what is this smell? And within a few minutes, it disappeared and it was gone. So these things, can come and go, and different things come in, and she just uses whatever protection is necessary. If something, in fact, when I was there, she had an experience which she really won't tell me much about, where one night I was in the guest room and I was lying there, and I wear blindfolds because I just don't want to see any light at all. It keeps me awake. And I felt this presence literally walk up on me along the side of the bed and was standing right next to me. And I feel it because my heart starts palpitating. I can just feel the presence around me. And yet, for whatever reason, I didn't take the blind off. I didn't try to look. And after a minute or two, it went away. Well, I found out later that night that something had came into her room, and she saw this big shadow in the corner. And she said it felt pretty negative. And she was like keeping her protection up and pretty much telling it to naff off. And again, she was vague on the details. Sometimes she won't tell me things.
Why do you think that is?
Well, she's very private in a lot of ways, but there's some things in her work she keeps to herself. I mean, with the book Walking with the Dead, she goes into a lot of detail about a lot of different cases and her processes, but they really only scratch the surface, because there's a lot of things that have happened to her that she keeps to herself, won't talk about, which I respect that. I mean,
when she's getting a psychic attack, Mark, does she get, as well as the spiritual things, does she get physical human things such as the black helicopters being followed, headlights flashing, weird phone calls, that kind of stuff, physical stuff?
During a psychic attack?
Mm.
No, I mean, I've only known the one that happened when I was in the middle of a conversation with her. So all I can tell you is that's the only one that I experienced and she's ever told me about. And it basically, it freezes her up. She's unable to talk. She's unable to move. It's almost like a state of paralysis, which is, I think it's very similar to a form of sleep paralysis, which I have experienced living in this one house that when I first moved here to New Jersey. They, you can't move, you can't speak, you can't do anything. And it feels like there's this weight pressing down on your chest. And I think she was experiences very similar to that, but probably in her case, much more intense.
Yeah. The reason I asked that is because this was more in the earlier days of my kind of spiritual development, is that I had exactly those kind of things. So I was, so I'd be doing the love and light stuff, which would be kind of like the spiritualist church and the readings and the mediumship and stuff. But then kind of like, aside from that, I'd get kind of like feelings of presences, exactly like you said about someone coming and standing next to you. But as well as that, I was getting people flashing their headlights at me constantly. The black helicopters are real. They do exist. And they were circling around my house quite a lot. And I was getting weird phone calls as well. And this was all kind of like within a cluster of kind of like, a target, they call it TIs, targeted individuals, a cluster of it. I don't have it so much now, thank goodness, but then I don't really do much remote viewing or kind of deep mediumship now. But certainly at the beginning, I was getting all of this shit happening.
Now, was this type of activity all happening at once, or you would experience one, then you'd experience another, like the headlights, then the helicopters?
So it would have been, it was a cluster. So for instance, the headlights thing, I would notice that whenever I'd go out in a car and I'm driving along, people coming towards me, there'd always be, somebody flashing their headlights at me, or I'd be driving along and somebody behind me would flashing their headlights at me. The kind of like the way you'd flick your headlights if you're letting somebody out of a junction or something like that. It was that kind of thing. And it was to the point where I was kind of pulling my car over and thinking like, are my brake lights out? Have I got a headlight that's out? And then the helicopter things, I'd notice, I'd just be watching TV. I wasn't even in tune. I wasn't doing readings. I'd just be watching TV. And I'd notice around about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, there'd be this bloody helicopter buzzing around. And then it got to the point where sometimes they'd come in the daylight as well, so you could actually see what they look like. And there's a very distinct difference. I don't know how police helicopters differentiate between military helicopters in the States, but there's a very distinct vibration and noise level between UK police helicopters and Apache black helicopters. And I've seen the black Apache helicopters, I've seen them, and they do sometimes circle around. This hasn't happened for quite a while, but it has happened. And it's bizarre. And then the phone calls as well. The phone calls were kind of like, it was kind of like, again, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and there'd be a phone call, and I'd pick it up. If this was landline, not mobile, I'd pick it up and there's nobody there, or there'd just be kind of like a noise that goes dick a dick dick a dick dick a dick. It's just bizarre stuff.
Yeah. I saw an interview recently, and I don't know who this lady is, who was talking about remote viewing, and remote viewing like bases in Antarctica or something like that. Something very, really hush hush, no.
Yeah.
And while she was remote viewing, all of a sudden down this corridor, this being, shadow person, whatever you want to call it, came racing towards her. It was giant size, and rushed her and literally booted her completely out of the complex while in astral travel remote viewing.
Yeah.
And she was able to sneak in by just masking her energy like a cloak.
Yeah.
And snuck back in around this thing and went all the way back into this room. And there was 2 men in uniform, military men, sitting in chairs with their eyes closed, and they were obviously remote viewing, and they were acting like sentries. So that energy that attacked her was them. So it makes me think, when you're talking about what happened to you, is when you're remote viewing, you're tapping into this part of the astral or these other dimensions, or I mean, however you want to explain it, that these governments or these entities are policing.
Yeah.
And if they detect your presence, then they start the harassment.
Yeah, Mark, that's exactly it. And this is why I was asking whether Irene had this, because everything that you just said is exactly what I was thinking.
I don't know, because she doesn't talk too much about her own remote viewing, and there was only a couple of cases where working with me, she really worked on it. She's scary accurate at times, but I've never heard from her talking about ever encountering somebody else trying to like stop her or push her out or attack her while she's trying to remote view.
Has she delved into what we'd call hush-hush locations? And if so, is there anything she could share what she found?
Not that I'm aware. We talked about it a few times, and I really wanted to look at Dulce, New Mexico myself, but for whatever reason, we never got around to it. And I have a sneaking suspicion that she knew not to go into these places, to not expose herself. And I think she just kind of covered it up, basically. But sometimes she also has a really short attention span too. So if she loses interest in something, that's it. She walks away from it.
With regard to the helicopters, my wife's daughter is quite interested in helicopters, and so she's downloaded an app which is something like Helicopter Tracker app or something. So we get quite a few of these large Chinook helicopters flying from Portland over our house, and she looks it up on her phone and says, oh, that's the whatever it is. So I'm just thinking, if you've got a black helicopter and it's going to fly outside your house, if you got the app, it'd be interesting to sort of see if it sort of shows you one outside your house, or in fact it's not coming up on the app. That would be
interesting.
There are a lot of different apps that track air traffic, and all air traffic is supposed to have transponder signals identifying the aircraft, and you're able to track it. The best example I've seen of that type of activity, I don't know if you've ever watched the American program, Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, where the scientists, and I love the show because, again, they take a purely scientific point of view, although they've done some things a little fringe, but mostly they're trying to collect data and the science. But in the show, there have been a few times when they've been buzzed by black helicopters.
Yeah.
And they're either Blackhawks or Chinooks or Apaches.
Yeah.
Like you said. And while they're going on, they're out and standing in these fields watching this. They are radioing back to their command center where their one researcher, the main tech guy, he has all these big screens up with the air traffic on there, and they don't appear. They're not transponding, so they don't show up on the apps.
And why would they?
Give an ID, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, they're if they're black ops and they're kind of part of black projects, why would they show up? Of course, they're not going to show up.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. It's like the camera is right there filming them too, so it's obviously they're real.
Yeah, followed by a mysterious car. They're probably not likely to have a genuine car license plate or something like that on the car as well.
No. I've interviewed a lot of people who've had encounters with these types of things, Men in Black or just shadowy government figures, and there's nothing identifying that you could track and find out who these people are that are harassing you.
Well, I think one of the most bizarre incidents, Mark, you know who Indigo is, and Neil, you know who Indigo is, don't you? On the show. So Indigo used to live about, and she won't mind me saying this because she goes public on this, and we've spoken about this, and I've asked her, am I okay kind of talking about this kind of thing? And she says, yeah. So I know what an Apache helicopter looks like. They're long and they're black. They have gun turrets underneath, and they have like a big radar disc, circular kind of thing on top of the rotor blades. So you've got where the rotor blades are, you've got kind of like if you imagine kind of like a Revels, like the suite, a Revels shape above that, and then right underneath it, you've got like a gun turrets kind of like facing forwards. And they're long and they're black. There's absolutely no way you could not know what an Apache is once you see an Apache. So myself and Indigo have had very odd things happen won't go into everything, but one of the oddest ones was I had an Apache fly near me, and funnily enough, I think I just came back from playing airsoft. So in the UK, similar to the US, we have airsoft, which is a bit like paintball, but kind of little plastic pellets. And I come back from that, and I was kind of getting all my kit off and kind of like getting everything kind of sorted and packed away again. And I noticed out of the window, I noticed an Apache helicopter, and just thought, that's really weird because why is there an Apache? And I wasn't doing anything in terms of like psychic or mediumship or tuning in or remote viewing, nothing like that. There was just a Apache helicopter flying around. And weirdly, I could see it, having buzzed my house a few times, I could see it go over into the town next door, which is where Indigo lives. And I could see it. And again, it was just hovering. And I thought to myself, I bet this is hovering right outside Indigo's place. So I message her and I say, Indigo, you haven't got a helicopter above you by any chance? She goes, yes, it's been buzzing right above my house. It's there. I can see it. So why is this helicopter buzzing my house, flying a couple of miles away? And I could still see it because I could see a couple of miles away over, and then buzzing over her house as well. What is the deal with that?
And this is, well, it's way different from the demonic stuff we were talking about earlier, but it's always fascinated me, like how they know things are going on, how they're able to react so quickly and coordinate like they do. And I think it's similar to that story I repeated with the remote viewing. I think that they have to be dedicating resources to basically spy on people, but it's not just through electronics. The microphones that can go into a house and you can listen to a conversation. I think they're using techniques similar to remote viewing.
Yeah,
that they target somebody and they're able to see what's going on, anticipate what's happening, show up at different times, and sometimes they're when they're very blatant about it. It means they're sending a message.
Yeah, this is it. There's absolutely no way these guys wanted to be hidden. This was a message.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're right, Mark. I think there's a marrying of what we would call the spiritual and the etheric, dare I say, interdimensional, possibly alien, possibly demonic, and the physical reality that we have here. It's not separate. It's not aliens and ghosts over here and like the military industrial complex over here. It's like that. That's what I think's going on.
It's these black ops programs that are these teams. They're all very interconnected.
It costs a hell of a lot of money to launch helicopters. I mean,
£1,600 half an hour.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard varying things like £10,000 to launch a helicopter. It depends maybe on what sort of helicopter it is and where it's got to come from.
Yeah, probably would actually.
But you kind of think, well, what kind of budget of launching a helicopter to come and float outside your house, then just go on to the next town for what? Like you're not like a major government agent or something.
Exactly that. That's exactly what myself and Indigo were saying. What's the bloody point? It's pathetic. What's the point? Because it's not going to change us. We're still going to be doing what we're doing. We're still going to be doing psychic mediumship. We're still going to be tuning in. We're still going to be talking about woo-woo subjects. It's not going to change us. So what's the bloody point? We don't get it.
Yeah, and we're talking about it publicly as well.
Exactly, and I'll keep talking about it, and I ain't going to shut up about it.
Yeah. I'm just intrigued about shadowy government figures that work for these shadowy government agencies, and how do they get recruited?
Now this could get us onto the Hat Man. Why is the Hat Man that people see, this infamous kind of like black shadowy figure, why is he not some kind of like spooky Tudor ghost? Why is he kind of like a 1950s B movie kind of FBI type kind of suited, film noir type?
Men in Black.
Yeah, exactly. But why vintage? Why the fedora hat? Why is he looking like something at the 50s?
No, it's a great question. I mean, and they never change either.
Yeah.
For like 30 something years. I mean, go back as far as the Mothman incidents way back in the 60s when the Men in Black were first showing up, and they were exactly like that.
Maybe they're stuck like that. They can't change. They're stuck as that sort of pre-programmed image, and it's a bit like Doctor Who's TARDIS. although there's a 1960s kind of invention, police boxes around the UK to call up the police, and Doctor Who's TARDIS was masquerading as one, and something got stuck, the chameleon device or whatever it's called in the story. And even today it appears as this old-fashioned police box, you know. So maybe these men in black have a kind of similar thing. Their chameleon devices got stuck.
There's a lot of evidence just in the stories, eyewitness reports of men in black where they actually don't act human. It's like what you said, kind of a mask. It's a hologram, or excuse me, they're presenting an image. That's what you perceive them as. And even if they're picked up on video or whatever, that's what they're surrounded with. That's what they pick up on. And but yeah, it could be that's it. They're just stuck with this one program. They don't even think about updating it because, you know, maybe with us and our culture and everything, they just don't understand it.
Yeah. Be hilarious if you saw this whirly thing appear in your room. It says, "Please stand by, men in black updating."
But you know,
do not switch off your vision.
from their perspective, I just don't understand why they wouldn't update it, because somebody in a 1950s outfit would look so out of place. You'd think if you were an intelligent being and you were kind of trying to infiltrate another race, you would be up to date with what that race looks like. I mean, it does seem like it's stuck, but I don't understand why it's stuck. Why would they not update it?
Yeah, I don't know. This is one of those things, these mysteries that I think are just a little bit beyond our understanding, comprehension. It's obviously somebody's doing it, but their reasoning and the why, maybe it's something that we won't be able to understand. Or we won't be able to understand their reasoning.
Maybe when they come into our reality, they can't pick a precise time, but they just throw a dart and they land somewhere in the 20th century or the 21st century. So they got a kind of clothes that generally might fit in with the general theme of that kind of time realm, but they can't be specific.
But why did they then show up immediately after, let's say, a UFO sighting or even a cryptid sighting? And they immediately show up knowing all the details of it, even when that witness has only experienced it all by themselves, no other witnesses. They never even got a chance to tell anybody yet. And then all of a sudden, men in black are knocking on their door.
Yeah.
Or military, uniformed, dressed people coming in and threatening them.
Yeah, we had a guy that we interviewed a couple of years ago. I actually met him in Birmingham. That's why I got him on the show, because he sounded very interesting. And he said that he had seen a UFO, like he was 17, walking the dog or something. And about 10 years later, the men in black showed up at his house. And it was a man and a woman. And you might remember this, Andy. I can't remember the guy's name now. A very nice chap. And he said they actually had photographs of this UFO that he had seen. But the thing is, when they showed him the photograph, he said the actual photo looked like it was taken from his own point of view, as if it's through his eyes, That was the weird thing. That was spooky.
Huh.
Yeah.
That kind of suggests that they go into people's minds and they can take snapshots from what we see.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's high strangeness. It's beyond our ability to explain, at least for now. And that's this is something that I'm personally very interested in, is high strangeness, and our reality, or what we think of as reality, isn't. Reality is so much more twisted and weird. And our brains can only process things in a certain way, and that's how, or people, never underestimate the power of denial. They're so focused on what they think they know, they won't open their eyes up to see what's going on around them, or at least entertain the idea that, hey, maybe our version of reality is not right.
Did I tell you about the craziest thing I've ever experienced in my entire life?
Nope, but I'm dying to hear it.
This is mental. And if I'm not a Christian, but if I was a Christian, I'd place my hand on the Bible and swear this to be true. This is absolutely mental. One of my favorite subjects is glitches in reality, and the fact that we live in a weird matrix and some things don't make sense. This is absolutely true. So Used to go with a group of friends to the cinema from around about the late 90s to around about 2010-ish. There was like a regular group of us that used to go to the cinema Fridays and Saturdays, and it was the I could say which cinema it is because it doesn't really matter. Stevenage Cinema in Hertfordshire. So we would be driving towards Stevenage Cinema in a group of lads. One particular time, Mark. This was an evening time. It was summertime and it was twilight. It was kind of, I suppose, still light. Looking outside now, it's not quite dark. It's not quite light. It's around about how it is now. We came up to a roundabout. On the left-hand side, we overtook a car that was going, because it was going really slowly. This car in front of us was going really slowly, and we wanted to get to our film, so we overtook it. And we looked to the left as we were overtaking it, and there was nobody in the car at all. Now we're not talking about a midget or a dwarf or a small person or a little old lady with their hands like that, because we were looking into this car. I was looking into it and I was thinking, what the hell is going on? And no, it wasn't a left-hand drive. It wasn't a foreign car. There were no passengers. There was nobody in the front seats. I forget the colour of it. I do forget the colour of it, but I do remember it being like a compact, like a smallish type car. To this day, I have absolutely zero logical explanation as to what the hell was going on there. Now, we talk about kind of like driverless cars now, kind of like, and this has been since, what would you say, guys, 2015 onwards? I don't know, when kind of Tesla and Musk and everyone, and now they're they're normal, aren't they? Driverless cars. They're talking about driverless lorries.
Oh,
You've
yes.
got these kind of like little driverless buggies that deliver things to people. But when this happened, was around about mid 2000s, kind of like 2004, 2005. So I would say this is pre-technology that we're aware of. And even if they were testing something like a driverless car, why on earth are you taking it out on the public roads? You know, surely this should be kind of like in a scientific laboratory type situation, not in a roundabout in Stevenage. I have zero explanation. And to this day, first of all, I'll swear hand on heart that actually happened exactly how I described it, with witnesses, and I have no explanation whatsoever as to what the hell was going on with that.
I've heard stories like that. I've seen some videos, but in this day and age of AI and certain special effects, I don't trust it. But a lot of the videos, but I've heard accounts very similar to that.
Really?
It's not exactly like this. Irene has an account in her book. It's a story that happened just a couple of years ago in Walking with the Dead, where she had a relative die up in Scotland. So they had to drive to the airport in Bristol, because of where she lives. It's the closest airport. But they had to leave at like 3 a.m. or whatever to get there. So it's very, very early, dark out, nobody's on the road, and they get lost. And they're trying to find their way or try to find some place they can get directions, but it's like so late that there's nothing open. And then as they're driving, they see this old man walking on the street. And so Irene just responded instinctively, and she even now thinks it was kind of strange, but she said to her husband, maybe why don't we ask him? And so they stopped and they asked him directions. He goes, "I'll show you." Now, this is where reality kind of takes a wonky turn, and it's funny how people react to it. Without another word, the gentleman climbs in the back seat of the car, not invited, and he goes, "It's easier if I show you."
Yeah.
So he's driving. They're like driving for 10 minutes. So go turn here, turn there, and they just did it. And when they get to right before where the airport is, they could see, he goes, "You can let me out here." So he gets out of the car, doesn't say a word. He starts walking off. They look at each other like, what happened? They look, he's gone. He's gone. And that was that was part of it. But later on, they went to the funeral. They got there in time. They came back home. And then like a week later, they start thinking about it. And they realize how strange the whole incident was. So they start describing what he looked like. They both described him completely different.
Wow.
Different clothes, different hairstyle, facial hair. One he had a hat and glasses, another one he didn't.
That's
And
mental.
she saw him in one way, he saw him in another.
Mm.
And it's wild. And then you stop to think, well, what was it? Was he some type of angelic being, who showed up at the last minute to help them get to the airport and go, a helpful person? Or who knows? But he appeared out of thin air, basically. That he was where he was walking at 4 a.m, out for a stroll, right when they needed him. Gets in the car and is not acting normal anyway, and then he just vanishes. And they both see him completely different hair color and style. Everything was different.
So, I mean, one possibility, and I don't know if this is the case, if it was some kind of being that wanted to interact, maybe this being wasn't really too fussed how it looked. So maybe it kind of delved into both of their minds to pluck a random person they might have seen in the past on the street and then projected that as a hologram onto them, because it wasn't about how he looked or how the being looked. It was more about getting them to the airport kind of thing.
And this goes off kind of on another subject, but when I found many stories, and one of my theories is these types of spiritual entities, and I'm not talking about just regular ghosts. Some could be demons, but even when you're dealing with higher level vibration, angelic type beings or whatnot, a great example is when people have a near-death experience. Okay. And they go to the other side. Of course, they're sent back eventually at some point. But they all describe everything slightly different. It's kind of the same. It's kind of not. But then the people they meet, the Christians or people more influenced by Christianity, see Jesus a lot. Others see, if they're Muslim, they see Muhammad or their version of Allah. Or the people, it's like these things can tap into your mind, and then they present themselves. The image of themselves is what they want. And in a lot of cases, it's what you need to see in order to better communicate their message and for you to accept it. And I think in the case of what happened with Irene and her husband, and again, this is only guesswork on my part, but I felt it was some type of higher level entity. And again, because it's putting up like a mask, they in their minds see this person, but they're both seeing the person differently because it's how their minds is interpreting the data that's being broadcast to them.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's almost going back to this theory that the universe acts as a mirror. And you're right in terms of different people from different kind of like cultures and customs. They will see what they're expecting to see on the other side of life. It's like the universe is custom tailoring reality to your consciousness as it crosses over. So yeah, if you're a Jew, you see Moses. If you're a Christian, you see Jesus. If you're Islamic, you see Muhammad, etc., etc., etc. If you're Buddhist, you see Buddha. So it's tailoring your perception of consciousness to your perception. It's weird, isn't it?
Well, especially if in those near-death experiences, the people are coming back into their physical bodies with their monkey brains, and it's the only way that they can interpret the imagery that they saw over there, because what they could really see, or somebody who really crosses over, I think it's absolutely completely different, and it's beyond description, beyond our human language. And so they're given a more Afterlife for Dummies version of what they're seeing in order for them to interpret or understand better what they're actually seeing. Do I think they're actually seeing Jesus? No. But they're seeing some type of being interacting with them. But if you see Jesus and he starts telling you things, you're going to listen if you're a Christian.
Yeah. As fuzzy felt Jesus.
Yeah. Buddy Jesus. Yeah. Yeah. It's, there's so much happening on these other levels of consciousness. And with our brains, we can only interpret so much, which is for those people who do astral traveling. I'm curious sometimes that what they may see, if they see stuff that they literally, and I've heard people say this, they literally can't put it into words. English language just won't cut it. Colors, especially. They talk about colors that we've never seen before, and they had no way of describing what they were.
I was reading something recently, and it's all to do with ITC communication and that kind of stuff. And messages from the other side were coming through ITC or computers or recorders or something to these researchers. And the people on the other side were talking about a level of reality between the earth and the spirit world that they were contacting, which no one was aware of. And it's like another level where there is another civilization there that exists, they were saying. And they said it's not bad, it's not necessarily good, it just runs alongside your own civilization, and it's between your world and our world. And sometimes you will get communications come through it. Sometimes it might show up through ITC or something, or it might show up in mediumistic or psychic readings or whatever it may be. I was just wondering, as we're discussing shadow men and demons and things, maybe that's where these other things might reside. I don't know.
It's a possibility. I mean, even science with string theory and astrophysicists like Dr. Michio Kaku will talk about the fact that so far they're able to, with their theory, they're able to say that there's at least 11 different dimensions. Personally, I think there's way more than that. It's just we have only gotten so far, but these dimensions are all happening at once, right alongside ours, and they're right here. See where I'm sticking my hand out, and this is where the other dimension is. It's just right there. Now, we can't perceive it. We're vibrating at a certain level, and it's vibrating at a different frequency. It's like tuning into a radio station in the old time where you could dial the knob and go through one station to another. They're all broadcasting simultaneously, but you can only listen to the station that you tune into.
Yeah.
So, but these things are all happening at once.
Yeah.
The one theory that really hurts my brain sometimes is the concept of time, that time doesn't exist, that all time is happening at once. There's only now, but yet instead of looking at having past lives or even maybe future lives, they're not happening in the past. They're happening right now. Everything is happening right now, which if I think about it too much, sometimes I want to cry. It's so mind bending, the concepts, and it really, I think for a lot of people, it's just too much for them to think about. And they would.
I was going to say, it makes sense in terms of how psychics and mediums are able to predict the future, because in effect there is no future. They're tapping into the information that's already out there of things that are happening now.
But at the same time, there are psychics who maybe are right only 50% of the time. Yeah. And it's not because they're a bad psychic, but it's because while the past is set in stone for our timeline, okay, from what I understand, we're constantly shifting timelines. It doesn't look like it. We don't notice it. But that would actually explain Mandela effects. Yeah. Why we remember certain events differently is because unknowingly we've jumped into another timeline where things are slightly different. And we're just not aware of it. Now, as far as the future goes, the possibilities are endless. Because for every action, there's an opposite reaction, and if any of the variables change just a little bit, that may not take place. Maybe something else will happen. Somebody who predicts a disaster, the world's going to end on June 25th, and then it doesn't happen. People go, ha ha, see, they were wrong. Not necessarily. Maybe it did end in one of these other timelines, because that's what they're able to see at the moment you let's say you remote view, okay, and you're trying to see a future event from right this moment right now. You're looking into the future and you see a future event. Between the time that you've remote viewed it to the time period when the event happens, so many different things could have happened to alter the direction of the timeline, and you miss it. Or things happen maybe weeks later or a year later, or they don't happen exactly as they were described, but a version of it happened. And again, it's not necessarily that the person just didn't see it right. It's just that when looking at the future, there's too many variables that can change. So when you're looking into the far future, especially, there's no way in predicting if that's going to really happen or not. In the short-term future, there's less probability that other factors will come into play to change the outcome of those events. I don't know if that makes any sense or not.
I at the weekend I was at this conference. Although it was called a cryptoid conference, there was a lady there talking about ghosts and spirits and hauntings and things. And she was saying that she outrightly rejected the stone tape theory. For those that want to know what the stone tape theory is, that's where the ghosts are alleged to be recordings associated with castles or old buildings and things that somehow the
what's buried underneath water, running water, granite, crystals,
and somehow it records those events. But she says, I don't agree with it. And I went up and asked her a question later on, or pointed something out to her, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But she says the reason I don't agree with it is because there was someone in Essex. So I thought that's near you, Andy. So you may know people that might know this story or not, where they saw like a load of cavemen come out somewhere at some place. She never kind of went into details about it. It was a load of cavemen.
Not heard of this one.
Like ghost cavemen, which they weren't near any castles or any stones or anything like that, and they were sighted by people, which was interesting. So she said that's why the stone tape theory doesn't work, because there's no stones around. I mean, I don't know the details of it, so I can't really comment too much. But then when it was time to ask her questions, I went up and sort of mentioned the fact that the stone tape theory was actually just a point in a play for today that was broadcast on BBC in the 1970s, where the play in question was about a paranormal research team who were investigating hauntings, and part of the plot of the play was talking about theories of ghosts. And this script writer or something came up with the idea of this stone tape theory about how ghosts are recordings on the atmosphere or something. And he wrote the stone tape theory as part of a plot of a play, and then people rolled with that idea and it became a theory in its own right, you see, which I thought was
I see. I remember when I first started investigating the paranormal back in the early 2000s, they didn't call it stone tape yet, but they were calling it I'm going to have a brain freeze right now. They were saying pretty much the same thing. It was like a tape recording playing over and over. And I don't buy that either, because, and this is, Irene has a couple of experiences in her book, and we've had many discussions about it. I think in most cases where people are seeing, let's say, someone dressed in period clothes, and maybe they're repeating a pattern or whatnot, and people go, oh, well, it's just a recording. I can't remember the popular term, but we think it's actually a time slip. And what's happening is you're seeing an actual event, but the conditions are right that time period is coming through and bleeding over into our time. Now, sometimes it happens and you can interact directly with people and they will interact with you. Other times it does seem like a recording because no one is aware of it. On our side, we could see this event taking place, even as simple as somebody walking down a corridor. People think, oh, it's a ghost, or it's, one of these memory type ghost events. but it's really just that time period bleeding through, and you're just actually watching it. Now you can watch it again and again because there's no time. That event is there, and the conditions are such that it bleeds through. Now Irene has in her book, there's this couple of stories, two stories where one, she was at her son was looking at this one flat. He was gonna buy, and Irene and her husband went over to see it. And at one point, Irene walked upstairs and by herself, and she walked into this one room, and there's this woman dressed in like 1920s Edwardian style maid clothing. And when she walked in, the woman turned and looked at her, and both of their jaws dropped and hit the floor at the same time. They saw each other.
So who's the real ghost?
And then it faded. And, people go, oh, well, that's just somebody, an old servant, they died, and now they're going back about their business. They think they're still at work. And they come up with all these elaborate things, which I just think are a bunch of bull. And in truth, what it is two very living, breathing human beings living in different time periods actually saw each other through whatever the conditions are that the time or our idea of time blended, the veil pulled back, or however you want to describe it, and they were able to see each other for a brief few seconds. And they reacted to each other.
What's interesting there is, okay, so you've got somebody who's modern looking at somebody who's vintage. Presumably, if this was a thing, presumably there would be some reports of people from our period seeing somebody from the future in a similar kind of interaction.
Well, see, back then, they would look at maybe how she's dressed or what she's wearing or whatnot, and not be able to describe it because it's beyond that person's comprehension what our society looks like. We now, in the era of very overly done time travel movies and different periods, we are able to understand if we're looking at somebody from a different time period. But another great story in Irene's book is a case that she and this other team member with her organization did on site, where they were walking around, they were taking pictures, and Irene just had this pull to go to the loo, open the door, and in front of is a sink and a big wall mirror. And she took a picture directly into the mirror. Now her other researcher was standing right behind her, trying to look over her shoulder. When she went and looked back at the picture later, and I'm serious, there's copies in the book, and heck, if you want, I'll send you copies of what she saw. There's another person there. In between her and her other researcher, who was literally standing behind her on like looking over her shoulder, there is this man who is dressed in tight-fitting black, almost like SWAT gear, with a helmet and a chin strap. And he's holding some device that we can't figure out what it is in his right hand. And he's moving, they're looking straight ahead, and he's moving from left to right between them, and he looks like he's in the middle of a fast walk. Like they just caught him in that still frame as he was going through them. She always used to call him her time traveler. I'm not sure if it was a time traveler, maybe from the future, although the gear he was wearing could kind of fit into our time period for tactical gear. But the helmet and with the chin strap, very interesting. You can clearly see his face. He looks as solid as them, and yet he shouldn't be there. It's a tiny bathroom, and he looked like he was walking like 50 feet.
That's crazy.
It's the strangest picture I've ever seen in my life, and I put it through Photoshop. I've tried.
Can you send it to me and Neil?
Yes, I'll send it to you.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah, it's incredible, and yet we can only try to theorize what she caught, what she saw. But it's a solid human, just like anybody else, doing something that had purpose, holding something that we can't really make out, and impossible for him to fit not only in that bathroom, but between her and her researcher.
And it's a guy in a lady's bathroom.
No, it's a home bathroom.
Oh, it's a home.
So
right.
expect something very, very tiny, very tiny space. And the way he's moving, it's looked like he's walking across, a very large room.
Wow. Well, this is how people used to communicate with black mirrors and things like that in Egyptian times. Scrying and that kind of thing was always done reflective surfaces, mirrors or bowls or anything that had a shiny surface. So it kind of comes as no surprise, even though it is a surprise, but it seems like one kind of possible method of communication is getting an image cast in a mirror or a reflection of something, which is very interesting. Yeah.
That happens a lot. And again, you have to wonder, the mirror is just reflecting the light from behind you. And maybe not. Or maybe not just behind you. There are videos that people have taken, like they're looking in a mirror, and then when they turn away, their image in the mirror doesn't turn. He is staring. Or people who go up on the side of a mirror, press against the wall outside of the mirror's range, but another camera focusing on them, they're nowhere near the mirror that could pick up their image. Yet when you look in the mirror, there they are, a couple of feet away, pressed up against the wall, completely out of the mirror's view, but the mirror still picks it up. How is that possible? And, it could be the mirrors are kind of windows into some of these other dimensions and realms.
Yeah. Spooky. So Irene's book, as we draw to a close, is called Walking with the Dead. Is that right?
It's Walking with the Dead is available in softcover, hardcover, and Kindle on Amazon.com, .co.uk. And everybody can pick that up. But I highly recommend it, not only just because I helped her publish it, but again, reading it and reading the stories, and it's amazing the kind of life that she lived.
Wow. Well, we wish her luck with it and yourself for publishing it. I mean, it's been out, a month or two now?
It's been out about a little over a month now. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good time to release it, I think. Well, thank you very much, Mark Johnson, head of the Paranormal UK Radio Network, along with Irene Allen-Block.
Pause. I'm not the head. Irene owns it, and Andy Mercer is our station manager, and he does a lot of work on it, and I do a little bit, but I don't run it. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, cool. All right. So thank you very much anyway, Mark, for joining us. Any final words, Andy, before we depart?
No, just a really fascinating talk. I hope people find it as interesting as we do, and it'd be nice to do a round two at some point with Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe there'll be a sequel book.
I'd be happy to come back.
Walking with more dead or something. Or running from the dead, I think, in my case.
There you go.
All right. Thank you very much, Mark. You have been listening and watching the Paranormal Peep Show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And stay tuned for more programs on the network coming up shortly. And we'll see you next month. Good night.
Good night.